If I said to you that you've experienced trauma, that everybody on this earth has experienced trauma in one form or another, I wonder what you would think. Would you agree with me? Would you shut down and not want to talk about it at all? Or would you be curious to know a little bit more? Because the truth of the matter is that trauma is something that everybody has experienced. And there's many different types of trauma. It comes in many different forms. It affects us each differently because we are unique and individual. And it's caused by a variety of different things. Some trauma is really easy to recognize and other trauma not so easy to recognize. For example, ancestral trauma or generational trauma. Two slightly different things. Generational trauma is where in our family line, going back 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations, often there can be a pattern or there can be something that's actually occurred in our family line, so in our generational line, that has a trauma attached to it. Things like war, poverty, there could, rape, abuse, immigration, those kind of things, and they can carry through our generational line to the present day and impact us. And often that's an unknown trauma, so it's not something we might necessarily know. Ancestral trauma, as the name implies, deals with ancestors, but it can actually also go back. So it also, in a lot of cultures, ancestors are actually considered to be all living things. So the interconnectedness and the oneness of everything. So trees, plants, rocks, all of that is considered to be part of the ancestors, but also past lives. So past lives that our soul has actually lived, and some of them can actually carry traumas in it as well, which come out in this current incarnation of our soul. That again is an unseen trauma. There's personal trauma, like the birth of a child, the loss of a loved one, miscarriage, a perceived failure to achieve a dream, something you perceive that you've failed at. Even success in business can bring trauma to varying degrees. There's many different types of personal trauma. Then there's trauma that's caused by others as well. So abuse of any kind, where you've had actual trauma placed onto you, or you've suffered from trauma because of the actions of somebody else. So domestic violence and any kind of abuse is the obvious example of that. And they can, all of those things and many other things can actually cause trauma. Trauma can be caused from very simple things as well. I mean, the most obvious trauma that, and when you say PTSD, most people would instantly think of soldiers and people that have gone to war and the trauma that they've actually returned with, and the post-traumatic stress disorder that they have as a result of the human atrocities that they've actually witnessed. Witnesses to war, people that have lived through wars, they are the really obvious examples of trauma. But trauma can happen to anybody, and when I started the video I said, every single person on this earth has actually suffered trauma in one way, shape or form. How it impacts us and the degree to which it impacts us depends on many things. It depends on obviously the type of trauma that you've actually been subjected to, but it also depends on you as an individual. We are all unique and we are all individual, and we all have different life experiences. So how trauma will impact me could, in a situation, could impact somebody completely different in the same situation. And there's different types of trauma. There's complex trauma, there's acute trauma, there's chronic trauma. So, again, the differing layers or levels, I guess, of trauma that impact a person. I know myself and both my children have been through prolonged domestic violence, and so we've all received a diagnosis from doctors of complex PTSD. because it was prolonged over a long period of time. So trauma is unique to the individual. It is irrespective of, cultural or socioeconomic status, race, religion, beliefs, all of those things that make us all different. They don't change or impact the fact that trauma carries an energy, and that energy is an energetic imprint within our physical body. And so understanding the energy of trauma is as important a part as understanding the cause of the trauma and the type of trauma. But it doesn't matter any of those things that make us individual or unique. The common thing about trauma is that it leaves that energetic imprint within our physical body. And when that sits there, and particularly if it sits there and it gets built on by further traumatic events, it actually creates an energetic imprint which can bring disease, discomfort, and disability. So it's really important to actually understand the energy of trauma and be able to shift and to clear it. And that is a lot of the work that I do. It's a lot of the work that Journey Home to Soul is about, in a very different kind of carefully supported and guided manner. It's also the work that is done by Ross in Root Cause, his business. So yeah, it's really important to understand the energy of trauma and that we can shift it. We do not have to be subjected to it, and it is a really important discussion that needs to be had. It mightn't be sexy, it mightn't be pretty, it mightn't be easy, but it's a really important thing to be able to talk freely about, to take away the shame and the stigma that often comes with when you mention the word trauma. I know when I freely talk about trauma, which I do because this is the work that I do, that often I can be met with resistance or confusion as to why I would be so passionate about something that people see as quite confronting. But it's because I know the power, the transformational power that comes from actually being able to talk about it, being able to look at it, be able to understand it, shift it, release the energy, and to heal from it. And that's what I've done in my life. So that's why I'm passionate about it. So yeah, I just wanted to do a bit of a brief video on the different types of trauma and how it can show up, and start the conversation about the fact that all of us, every human on this earth, has suffered trauma. So let's open the conversation and start talking about it more freely.